Today's account comes from Alex Brooks, 61, who shared what happened when his ex-wife married the man she'd called his superior, a man who turned out to have built his entire career on Alex's own work. This account has been dramatized to protect privacy. AI narration is used throughout. Any resemblance to real persons is coincidental.
Have you ever been told you're not enough by someone who learned everything they know from watching you? Not a stranger, not a critic who never knew you, someone who sat across from you at dinner for 22 years, someone who watched you build something from scratch and decided, somewhere along the way, that the building wasn't impressive enough, that the builder wasn't impressive enough. And then, and this is the part that takes a moment to absorb, walked out your front door and into the arms of a man who had copied your blueprint so precisely that even he had probably started to believe they were his. That's where this story starts. Not with the divorce. With the wedding announcement card. My name is Alex Brooks. I'm 61 years old. I live in Naperville, Illinois, the western suburb of Chicago where the streets are named after trees and everyone has a Costco membership and a strong opinion about high school football. I spent 33 years building a wealth management practice. Not a firm in the venture capital sense, a practice, the kind built one client relationship at a time, on the south side of the Chicago Metro, starting with a one-room office on Jefferson Avenue in 2001 and eventually reaching a point where I had 12 employees, a book of business worth respecting, and a reputation in DuPage County that had taken 30 years and about 10,000 hours of client dinners to construct. My ex-wife's name is Pamela. She's 59. We met in 1999 at a mutual friend's 4th of July party in Lisle, got married in 2002, and spent 22 years building a life in Naperville that I thought, until approximately March of last year, was reasonably solid. Pamela is intelligent, organized, and possessed of a very specific quality I only fully understood after the divorce. She has always measured the worth of things against a moving standard, not a fixed one, a moving one. The house is good until someone she knows gets a better house. The career is impressive until someone's husband gets a bigger title. It's not malice. It's a kind of perpetual benchmarking that I think she was born with and couldn't help. I say this without anger. It's just accurate. The wedding announcement card arrived March 19th. I know the exact date because I keep my mail organized. Another habit, not a compulsion. The card was cream-colored, thick stock, the kind that cost real money at a print shop. The front had their names in gold embossed lettering, Pamela Ann Brooks Pruitt and Dale Michael Pruitt. Inside, a brief note in Pamela's handwriting, in blue ink. Wanted you to be the first to know. He's everything you never were. I read it twice. Then I put it face down on the kitchen counter and looked at it for a long time without touching it. Here's what I want you to understand about that moment, because it matters to what comes next. I was not destroyed by that sentence. I was curious about it. Because everything you never were is a very specific phrase. It requires a comparison. And the comparison requires knowing what I was, what I actually was, versus what Dale had apparently represented himself to be. So I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and looked up Pruitt Wealth Partners. The website was professionally designed. The bio was well written. Dale's credentials were solid. The firm's stated methodology was described in a short paragraph under the heading Our Approach. I read it once. I read it again. Then I opened a folder on my hard drive. A folder labeled Internal Documents, Brooks Wealth Management. 2017. I found the document I was looking for in about 90 seconds. The language wasn't identical. It had been reworked, synonyms substituted, paragraph structure adjusted, a few additional sentences added at the end, but the framework was mine. The horizon profile, the specific sequence of psychological risk questions, the weighting methodology, the client classification tiers. It was mine, and someone had taken it. I didn't feel angry, I thought, sitting at the kitchen table with both documents on the screen side by side. I felt something I can only describe as the specific clarity that comes when a puzzle piece you've been looking for drops in from somewhere you weren't expecting. I closed the laptop. I went to bed, and in the morning, I started making calls. That was the last quiet morning for a while. The first call I made was to Dennis. I need a referral, I told him. A forensic accountant. Someone who works commercial disputes, specifically intellectual property. Dennis had a pen in his hand before I finished the sentence. What kind of IP? He asked. A proprietary methodology, I said. Documented internally, never formally protected, used by a former employee who built a competing practice on it. Dennis was quiet for a moment. Alex, careful. How long ago was this documented? 2017, fully time-stamped in our document management system. Email chains, version history, the works. Another pause. How closely does his public-facing material resemble yours? Close enough that I recognized it in one reading. Dennis gave me a name, Karen Whitfield, a forensic accountant based in Chicago who specialized in financial services IP disputes. He said she was thorough, methodical, and did not charge for preliminary assessments. One more thing, I told Dennis. I need to know the exact date that Dale Pruitt formed his LLC. Dennis pulled it up while I was on the phone. September 2019, 3 months after I let Dale go. 3 months, I thought. He had the framework in his head before he walked out the door. I wrote the date in the notebook. Then I closed it, clipped the pen, and went to water the tomatoes. Karen Whitfield's office is on West Monroe Street in Chicago's Loop, on the 14th floor of a building that has the specific institutional gravity of a place where serious financial arguments go to be resolved. She met me on March 25th, 11 days after the divorce finalized, at 9:30 a.m. She was 53, precise, with the quality of attention that forensic work produces in people who do it well, the ability to hold a large number of details simultaneously without losing the thread between them. I brought 3 things: my laptop, the internal document folder on a USB drive, and the notebook. She brought a yellow legal pad. Walk me through the methodology, she said. Not the documents first. The methodology. She wanted to hear me explain it before she read it. So I did. I described the horizon profile the way I'd describe it to a new client, the psychological risk assessment, the time horizon weighting, the classification tiers. I walked her through the development history. The first version in 2010, the refined version in 2014 when I brought it into the firm's formal onboarding process, the documented version in 2017 when I digitized our internal training materials. She wrote continuously. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "Show me Dale Pruitt's website." I pulled it up. She read the methodology paragraph. She looked at my document. She read the paragraph again. "This is a derivative work," she said. Flat, factual. Not a copy. He was smart enough for that. But the structure, the sequence, the classification logic, these are all present, reworked enough to provide plausible deniability in a casual review, not reworked enough to survive a documented comparison. Can we prove it? She tapped the legal pad. We can demonstrate substantial similarity with documented prior art. Whether that rises to misappropriation depends on how the methodology was protected at the time he accessed it. It was in our internal system, I told her. Accessible to employees, including Dale, while he worked there. She wrote something. Trade secret law in Illinois requires that the holder take reasonable measures to protect the secret. If it was on an internal system with standard employee access controls, and that may be sufficient, if it was unrestricted, we had NDAs, I said. Standard employment agreements with a non-disclosure clause and a 1-year non-compete. She looked up. Does Dale's firm operate in your geographic market? Oak Brook, I said. 12 miles from my practice. A pause. Mr. Brooks. Her voice was even. You may have more than a methodology dispute. The second conflict came on April 3rd, and it came from a direction I hadn't anticipated. My friend Tom Nakamura called me at 7:45 p.m. Tom and I had been friends since 2003. He was one of my earliest clients, a structural engineer in Downers Grove who had eventually become a genuine friend in the way that client relationships sometimes do when they go on long enough. Tom was 58, methodical, deeply principled, and not prone to calling in the evening without a reason. Alex. His voice had the quality of someone choosing words carefully. I need to tell you something, and I want you to know I'm telling you because I think you should know, not because I've decided anything. Okay, I said. Dale Pruitt called me in February, before your divorce was final. A pause. He pitched me, said he was building his practice and looking for anchor clients, said he'd worked with some of the best advisors in DuPage County and had a proprietary methodology for client assessment. I waited. He gave me a demo of the framework, Tom said. Alex, it was your process. I didn't realize it at the time because I'd never seen it formally. I just knew it was good. Did you become a client? I asked. A longer pause. Yes. There it is, I thought. That's the one that costs something. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was looking at the wall of my home office in Naperville, the framed photo of Tom and me from a golf trip to Galena in 2011, which is a 4-hour drive northwest of Chicago along the Mississippi River. We both looked younger in the photo. We were. Tom, I said finally, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly, regardless of what you think it means. That's the only way I know how to answer, he said. When you went to Dale, did you know he'd worked for me? He told me, Tom said. He said you'd been one of his mentors. He said he'd taken what he learned and built on it. Built on it. That was the phrase. Tom, I said, I'm going to have a conversation with you in the next few days about some documents. I need you to look at them with the same eyes you bring to a structural assessment. Quiet. Send them when you're ready, Tom said. The third thing happened the next morning, April 4th, and it was the one that made everything personal. Not just professional, not just legal, but the specific category of personal that means you can no longer pretend it's just a business dispute. I received a text from Greg Harmon. Greg ran Harmon Capital in Downers Grove, one of the two contacts I had personally introduced to Dale in 2019 when I let him go. Greg was 62, old school, the kind of man who remembered exactly who had made his introductions and why. The text read, Alex, have a minute to talk? Something you should know about Dale Pruitt. I called him immediately. Greg answered on the first ring. I've been his referral source for 3 years, Greg said without preamble. He told me he'd developed his methodology independently, post-Brooks. I believed him because I had no reason not to. A pause. My assistant pulled our old email archives last month for an unrelated audit. Found an email from you, March 2018, where you described the Horizon profile to me in detail. I remember that lunch now. You were telling me about the training materials you'd built. I remember the lunch, I said. Dale's framework is the same, Greg said. I've been sending him clients based on a methodology you built, and I didn't know it, and I don't appreciate being put in that position. His voice was controlled, but not entirely. What are you doing about it? I'm in the documentation phase, I said. Karen Whitfield is running the forensic side. Karen's good, Greg said immediately. Whatever you need from me, documents, testimony, whatever the word is, I'm in. Whatever the word is. Greg Harmon didn't deal in legal language. He dealt in loyalty, which was older and in some ways more durable. I wrote it in the notebook. Greg, in, Tom, complicated but honest. Dale's foundation, my introduction, my methodology, my client relationships. This is not a self-made man. This is a reconstructed man. Karen came back to me on April 9th with a 47-page preliminary assessment. She walked me through it section by section at her office on West Monroe, a Tuesday morning, rain against the windows, coffee she didn't offer, but that I'd stopped at the Intelligentsia on Randolph Street to bring. She accepted it without comment, which I took as a good sign. The report identified 4 distinct areas of concern. First, substantial similarity between the Horizon profile documentation and the methodology described on the Pruitt Wealth Partners website and in Dale's client onboarding materials, which Karen had obtained through a standard business records request. Second, Dale's employment agreement with Brooks Wealth Management, which included a standard non-disclosure clause and a 12-month non-compete covering DuPage County. Karen had confirmed the non-compete had been breached. Pruitt Wealth Partners had begun actively soliciting clients in DuPage County within 6 months of Dale's departure, not 12. Third, 3 clients of Pruitt Wealth Partners, including Tom and 2 others who had been introduced to Dale directly by Alex, whose original connection to those clients was through Brooks Wealth Management, and whose transition to Dale had involved no formal referral process and no acknowledgement of the original relationship. Fourth, and Karen said this one carefully, evidence that Pruitt Wealth Partners had presented the Horizon Profile methodology to at least 2 institutional prospective clients as a proprietary system developed independently by Dale Pruitt with no attribution to its actual origin. "This last one," Karen said, tapping page 47. "This is where it moves from civil IP dispute to potential misrepresentation." I looked at the page. "How do we proceed?" I asked. "Dennis files," she said. "We lead with the non-compete breach. That's the cleanest claim. We attach the IP documentation as a secondary claim. We send the filing simultaneously to Dale's 3 anchor clients with a factual summary. No accusations, just documented timeline." "What's the likely outcome?" Karen set down her coffee. "Settlements usually, in cases like this. He'll want to avoid discovery. Discovery in a financial services IP case is very unpleasant for the party who copied." I looked at the rain against the windows. He built an entire career on the foundation I laid, I thought. And then my wife called him everything I never was. I picked up the pen. "Tell Dennis to file," I said. "I want to tell you about the complication because I promised you there would be one, and there always is." Tom Nakamura received the factual summary on April 15th. Dennis sent it directly, per Karen's instruction, with a cover letter that was purely informational, documenting the timeline, the connection, the methodology, nothing editorial, just facts with dates attached. Tom called me that evening, 6:22 p.m. He didn't say anything for a moment after I answered. "I should have called you in February," he said finally. "When Dale pitched me, I should have called you." "You didn't know there was anything to call about," I told him. "I knew who you were," Tom said. "I knew who he was." I made a calculation. A pause. "I think I wanted to believe the new thing was completely new. It's easier that way. It's easier that way." I wrote that in the notebook that night. "Tom," I said, "what do you want to do going forward?" A long pause. "I want to work with my friend," he said. "If he'll have me." I told him I'd have him. That was the hardest part of the whole process. Not the filing, not the forensic report, not even the wedding announcement card. It was the moment when a friend admitted that the ease of a fiction had, for a while, been more convenient than the work of loyalty, and then chose the work of loyalty anyway. I filed that under things I didn't expect to learn from this. Dennis filed on April 22nd, DuPage County Circuit Court. 2 claims: breach of the non-compete agreement and trade secret misappropriation under the Illinois Trade Secrets Act. The filing was 28 pages. Karen's forensic report was attached as Exhibit A. The 2017 internal documentation was Exhibit B. Dale's employment agreement was Exhibit C. Dale's attorney called Dennis within 48 hours. That is, for the record, not the behavior of a man with nothing to hide. That is the behavior of a man who has read the exhibits and understands what discovery looks like. Dennis called me April 24th. "His attorney called," Dennis said. "They want to talk settlement." "How quickly?" "He asked for a meeting within 2 weeks." I thought about that. "What did you tell him?" "I told him we'd consider it after we reviewed their response to the filing." A pause. "Alex, they haven't filed a response yet. They're skipping the response and going straight to settlement talks. That tells you something." It told me exactly what I thought it told me. "Schedule the meeting," I said. The meeting was May 8th. A conference room at Dennis's office on South Washington Street in Naperville. The same building where I'd been sitting when Dennis told me about the marriage certificate. The symmetry was not lost on me. Dale came with his attorney, a man named Ray Kowalski, who practiced out of Schaumburg and had the look of someone who had handled a number of these conversations and found them professionally unpleasant but financially reliable. Dale himself was, and I want to be precise here, exactly what I remembered from that November dinner, minus the easy confidence. The silver-streaked hair was the same, the good tailoring was the same, but the quality of his presence in the room was different. He was smaller somehow, not physically, the other way. He looked at me once when he walked in. I nodded. He looked away. There it is, I thought. That's the tell. The settlement negotiation took 4 hours and 2 separate recesses. I won't give you the exact terms because they're under a confidentiality agreement, but I will tell you the shape of it. A financial settlement that acknowledged the non-compete breach, a licensing acknowledgement for the Horizon Profile that gave Brooks Wealth Management documented ownership with Dale's signature on it, and a provision that 3 specific client relationships, including Tom's, would be formally returned to Brooks Wealth Management with a transition period. Dale's attorney tried twice to reframe the licensing acknowledgement as a collaborative development recognition rather than an ownership assignment. Karen, who attended the meeting as my expert witness, produced page 47 of her report both times. The second time, Ray Kowalski looked at Dale and gave him the specific look that attorneys give clients when the client needs to stop talking and accept the terms. Dale signed at 3:47 p.m. I watched him sign. I didn't feel what I expected to feel. I expected something. Satisfaction, relief, the particular quiet of a finished argument. What I felt instead was something closer to tired. The specific tiredness of a person who has been in a long, slow argument with the world about the value of their own work, and the argument is finally, actually over. Here's the complication I didn't plan for. The day after the settlement, Pamela called me. Not from her cell, from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up because I pick up unfamiliar numbers. Habit. Alex. Her voice was different. Not the Pamela of the divorce proceedings, not the Pamela of 22 years of marriage, something more stripped down. I heard about the settlement. Word travels, I said. A pause. I didn't know, she said. About the methodology. I didn't know what he'd... She stopped, started again. I knew Dale worked for you. I didn't know the details of how he built his practice. I waited. The card, she said. The one I sent. That was... Another stop. That was a cruel thing to do. Yes, I said. It was. Silence. I don't know what I expected you to say, she said. I don't either, I told her. We stayed on the line for a few more seconds, not saying anything, just the line open. Then she said, I'm sorry, Alex. And because it was true, and because I've been carrying too many things for too long, and because being right is not the same as being free, I told her, I know. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. The wedding announcement card was still on the counter, face down, where I'd put it in March. I picked it up. I looked at it one more time. He's everything you never were. Then I put it in the recycling bin under the sink. And I went to water the tomatoes. Here is the thing I've been circling around since the night I put the wedding announcement card face down on the kitchen counter and went to find the 2017 folder. We underestimate the people who taught us, not out of malice usually, out of a very human cognitive shortcut. When we watch someone do something, it looks easier than it is. The expert makes it look smooth. The 30 years of calibration that produce the smooth look are invisible. They happened before we arrived. So we watch the expert, absorb what they do, learn to replicate the pattern, and eventually, if we're not careful, begin to believe the pattern was ours to begin with. This is how knowledge transfers. It is also, when it happens without acknowledgement, how theft disguises itself as development. Dale didn't think of himself as a thief. I'm fairly certain of that. He thought of himself as a man who had learned from good training and built on it. The distinction he failed to make, and this matters, is between building on something and building with something that belongs to someone else. You can build on a foundation, but if the foundation was laid by another man, you do not get to tell people you built it yourself. Pamela made the same error, and it was the more human one. She watched me work for 22 years. She saw the practice grow, the client relationships deepen, the reputation accumulate, and over time, the slow accretion of a real thing looked to her like stagnation rather than depth. Because depth is invisible from the outside. Depth looks to someone benchmarking against a moving standard, like a man who isn't growing because he isn't loudly announcing each new iteration of himself. Dale was announcing. Dale had a new firm with a sleek website and a well-tailored suit and the specific energy of a man in the middle of his founding narrative, the exciting part, before the maintenance sets in. And Pamela, who has always been drawn toward the exciting part of things, mistook the announcement for the achievement. She will learn eventually the difference between the two. Settlement documents have a way of educating people on the subject. But here's what I actually want to say to you. The thing I want you to take from this story that isn't about revenge or legal filings or forensic accountants, although all of those things were satisfying in their own right. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest one. It's the one who built the thing the loud person is standing on. I spent 33 years building quietly. Not because I lacked confidence, because I understood that the work was the proof, and the proof would still be there when everything else had been said. I documented because documenting is how engineers think, and I had spent enough time with engineers to absorb their habits. I filed because the filing was correct, not because I needed anyone to know I was right. And when the moment came, when the forensic report landed on page 47 and Karen said he didn't build this, there was no drama in it. There was just the click of a thing being confirmed that I had already known was true. What the story teaches, underneath all the specific facts of it, is this. The people who are most likely to be taken advantage of are the ones who do invisible work without insisting on credit. And the reason they don't insist on credit is usually the same reason the work is good. They care more about doing it right than being seen doing it. That quality, which is a virtue, can also make you a target. The fix is not to stop doing invisible work. The fix is to document it, date it, keep the folder. Not because you expect to need it, because the world occasionally requires that you be able to prove what you already know. I have 47 green notebooks in a box in my home office. Every client meeting, every development note, every significant decision. My daughter once asked me why I kept them all. Because memory is selective, I told her, but ink doesn't editorialize. The notebooks were in the folder. The folder was in the filing cabinet. The filing cabinet was exactly where I'd left it. That's the whole story. The man who built a career on my work thought the blueprints had disappeared when I wasn't looking. They were in the drawer. They were always in the drawer.